Firstly, we have the update about Italy, concerning Italy, and this is particularly about the Prime Minister, who is Giorgia Meloni. Giorgia Meloni. I do beg your pardon. So Miss Giorgia Meloni from Italy, and is the first female Prime Minister, actually made a landslide or a groundbreaking sort of ruling where pretty much it was passed through their parliament and everything, where Italy has banned gay and lesbian couples from becoming parents. So that is actually something that has come into passing. And in a second, I'm just going to explain why this is significant, especially when I'm talking about the matters of the spirit, but from a prophetic sort of timeline. But of course, we understand as to why homosexuality and is one of the things that God actually absolutely abhors. So in this one particular breaking news, and I think it happened on the 5th of August of 2025, where in this caption that I actually have here actually says, Italy has approved a new law that criminalizes the use of surrogacy for gay and lesbian couples, even when the procedure is done legally abroad. Offenders may face fines and prison sentences. Supporters say the measure defends the dignity of motherhood and aligns with the country's Christian-rooted view of family. While critics argue it discriminates against LGBT couples, many see it as a reaffirmation of the natural order of parenthood and the traditional family. So I think that's quite self-explanatory in the sense that we are looking at it from the Christian framework. And that is something that is, it's a topical issue. And one we've seen that there's this leaning towards the right, especially with the political climate and especially certain countries and, where the citizens are finally sort of hitting back. And it was Giorgia Meloni, who is part of the party that's actually called Fratelli d'Italia, which is a conservative one. And it's the first time that Italy had flipped conservative for quite a long time, actually. I don't know too much about the political history there, but I did know that when she came in and it was announced that she's the first female prime minister, and it was something that I saw that happened in the spirit where I could not exactly denote why I had the first beast tackling or going against a woman who had the whip and acting as a tamer to tame this first beast in that whole prophecy concerning the whole lightning showdown in Rome. That's the one. So she is actually a Roman citizen, as in Miss Giorgia Meloni. So that is the other thing concerning all of this. And of course, me being a SS Lazio supporter, which is Lazio's like the province which Rome actually situated in, and having been a supporter and a fan for a long time in terms of the football club, one thing I know is that they're considered the ultra-right, as in meaning that they're right-wingers, and then the AS Roma fans are more on the left in terms of the political landscape of things. So they're considered that. Please don't ask me how nuanced it is in terms of the fan base and their voting habits, or that's just not something I know too much about. But I just know that they have the ultras within the frameworks, because I'm pretty sure that most of the fans are pretty much somewhere in the middle. They wouldn't exactly be ultras, but effectively what has happened is that the rivalry of the two football teams is quite, it's quite intense. So it's just not something that is, in the best spirit of the game at all. It's just some hooliganism, which is pretty much linked to demonism, in just my opinion, and just my humble opinion on that one. But effectively, what it's done in the terms of the landscape of Rome, and just linking it back to the prophecy where I saw this first beast. Now, if you remember that the first beast was the one that is actually situated in Rome and is the king of Rome and is ultimately the role of Pope. Now, if you recall that I actually stated that this beast looked like a liger or a lion, and then meaning that ultimately a lion, and hence we have Pope Leo XIV right now. So there is a linkage to this, and what I'm saying is this: that don't be surprised that Pope Leo, who has been known as a staunch supporter of Pope Francis, who was known as a bit of a leftist, and he started being a bit cozy with the LGBTQ community that perhaps we'll see it down the line. Whereas this is where the confirmation of Pope Leo becoming, or actually being identified as, what is going to be known as the first beast, especially in the years to come. Especially that we're ramping up to 2028. And when I explained that particular dream and what I had seen there as far as this female who was acting as the lion tamer, I then said to people when I came back and I heard about Giorgia Meloni, I said, I think this is who this female lion tamer was. That it has to be Giorgia Meloni. As she had the whip and was trying to get this first beast under control, as she had done previously, and then as it grew on its two hinds, meaning on its back two legs, and it started standing upright like a human, as even the Bible and the prophecy says, that's when this first beast overpowered her and got her out of the way, and then started taking a prominent position and then summoned this lightning from the sky. So that's exactly how I saw it, and which I also explained that these first beast as this pretty much is going to be the emperor of the world. So what even the scriptures say, that is going to be someone who was previously a king of Rome, coming back in and now taking his position back as the beast for this period, which was known as the beast system, which will run for an approximate of 3.5 years. Please don't ask me if it's actual Gregorian calendar years or what kind of biblical years, because, God can do his own thing, especially that 3.5 could mean that it's pretty much not even a complete cycle of 7. Or, when it reaches 7 days or 7 in biblical terms, that means a completion. But then that would indicate that it's only half a completion, if you get what I'm trying to say and what it actually all entails down the line. So that's what it is effectively just pointing towards. And this is something one needs to be just keeping the finger on the pulse a bit. And this, with everything that's happening, especially this radical wokeism, and especially in the United States with Donald Trump having been, as far as the MAGA sort of crowd and whatever people think about him and everything, there has been this resistance to this whole left-wing policy that Obama has been sort of just jumping jumping along and everything else. That is quite, that you're seeing this, not antagonism as to say, but it's actually, let me just put it this way, that it is what is fueled by God's anger, so to speak, and this flipping back over as far as fighting against the family establishment. So we are seeing a resistance to that, to restoring it back to godly principles. And this is not to say that everybody that is sort of on the right is necessarily a Christian, because we've seen even with that, is it Vikesh Ramaswamy, that he's an idol worshipper effectively, because he still says that he's pretty much Hindu, whatever it is, and that's just what it is. But he was so popular amongst the conservative and the Republican base that he almost, people actually wanted him in. They were saying, after Donald Trump, they're looking at getting him in. And I'm thinking, hang on, the red flag is the fact that he's not even Christian, But I suppose when it comes to the whole political framework, and this is why I'm going back to the SS Lazio and the whole AS Roma rivalry between left and right, that it's not necessarily always based upon biblical principles and necessarily being an advocate for God, in the sense, yes, one is relatively and significantly more godly, right, in terms of representation. But understand that the nature of Satan is that Satan, as even the Bible describes, is he's an angel who poses as an angel of light or light bearer. Hence, even them giving him the name Lucifer, which is not something that you see in the Bible as per se, but effectively just means the light bearer. So he acts like an angel of light in this instance, and believed to have been actually leading the worship in heavens before he got kicked out. So all he needs is just a little bit of a wiggle room, whereas he just needs that 1% lie and the 99% truth. So also just be wary of that. But I do believe that, of course, even people are saying, well, Donald Trump, look how left-leaning he was and how liberal he was. And even now, he doesn't always operate from the spirit or the actual fruits of the spirit, meaning that he does use some crass language and stuff like that at times. And especially when he dropped that F-bomb in front of the White House helicopter, I don't know if it was about a month ago and everything. And everybody was saying, wow, how unprecedented. And I'm like, hey, that's Donald Trump. And even at the rallies, I was like, okay, that's one thing about him. But effectively, like I always lamented, I always stood by it, that as a whole, look, as far as a person turning away from his old habits and actually picking up godly principles. And what's one thing about him, and especially whenever he's been on these Christian missions and holding public meetings in the White House and everything. And this is, sometimes he's done the whole interfaith thing, which he's leaned a bit too much, which is not something that he should be doing. But that is unfortunately the nature of, him having to be this peacemaker and wanting to be this peacemaker in this whole realm of things. But ultimately, we are seeing that there's a deferring towards Pope Leo once again as being the peacemaker, meaning that ultimately he's not going to be getting this whole Nobel Peace Prize award that he's looking for, or being this president of peace that he's thinking of. But the one that's going to be like, oh, well, I will establish peace is Pope Leo, like I was explaining, and it's already heading towards that way. But what it's going to do is going to be a pivot of power, and that's going to show that his legitimacy in this instance. And even when you look at the first seal in the book of Revelation, that of course it speaks about the one who comes in, especially trying to bear the whole peace, and he has a crown and everything, and that authority to do that. That's obviously someone who has been given the whole status of being the spiritual head or spiritual father of the United Nations. And it's certainly not Donald Trump, as much as he wants it. And there is a little bit of him being a little prideful in that instance. But effectively, what we are seeing is that, with Donald Trump being this, conservative voice and starting to have a lot more Christian engagement and being more prayerful. And something that he's publicly just shown, whether you believe it's legit or not, I don't know. That's completely up to you. I'm not going to go as far as to say I defend him in all this. But of course, I'm understanding by the fact that yes, and it's already been shown that he has a seal of protection of him that is shown that he belongs to the Lamb. And he has not shied away from ever saying, the true living God of the Bible is the one who spared his life just to make America great. And I'm saying, is that perhaps not an indication to those that I feel that they're so hard-hearted, and something that we all know as far as salvation and who makes it into the kingdom, who doesn't really, ultimately, especially at that, it's not a contest of how long you've been doing it. It's the fact that ultimately, before the time of the end, are you actually showing a converted or a changed heart? And I think he's come a long way from what he used to be. Despite his obvious flaws. And I've already explained a few things, which I'm not going to hop on too much about. But, in all of this, and especially that we've seen the state of Utah has been the first to ban the pride flag, and it's going to start going elsewhere because, I don't know exactly how the state of Utah actually is. It's not a swing state. I think it is fairly conservative, but we're going to see other states that are pretty much even more deeper red or more conservative in this instance, going to start getting into that trend of banning that whole pride flag and this whole thing about homosexuality and all that instance and everything away from this wokeism that we're seeing in this time and age. But effectively, I mean, I do believe that what will happen is Satan's plan of bringing the beast, especially that we're seeing this resistance from human nature against the devil's vices and the devil's plans in this instance to pretty much end society through this LGBTQ agenda, will obviously come to a halt. And of course, we already seen that what I've already stated about President Obama already being exposed as that, and people are already talking about that. It's already coming out that they believe that, hang on, there was a gay lover, and especially that in the days, I'm not going to get into that whole theory. I'm just, I'm not even going to say allegedly. So they're just saying, people are just saying that because it's not coming from me. I don't care. But effectively, I do care that the fact is this, is that he's been as antichrist as what we have known him to be. He's, complete imposter in more ways than one, which those who follow the podcast will tell you, especially when it comes to the role of the second beast and the false prophet in this instance. Anyway, that's enough on that. I'm going to get into the next topic of the show in a bit, which is the main segment and all about the fact of why we actually say Amen and the breath of life that is only belongs to the Father in heaven.